This is a great one for me. I've followed your journey since the film came out in 2013. It's something that resonated with me massively. I've always been in sales myself, and to follow your journey has been a really interesting one for me. So for people that are just getting familiar with this, they probably recognize you first and foremost from that film. They may not have followed your journey all the way through. So who was the Wolf on Wall Street back then?
Back at the movie days?
The guy you were being played in the movie.
He was definitely younger.
Yeah.
So also, I was, one of these young people, basically a born entrepreneur, born salesman from the time I emerged from my mother's womb. And I've been starting businesses and selling since I was really, really young. And what you saw happen in the movie was the result of me developing a system for training salesmen that allowed young kids who really were not naturally gifted at sales and weren't that educated to come off as being highly educated and allow them to close in the same manner that a world-class salesperson would close. So what that did is it essentially closed the gap and gave them the ability to do things they never could have done otherwise. So you take a young kid who just graduated from high school or barely, maybe he went to 2 years of college, didn't do that well, and say, okay, hey, I want you to go close, a multi-millionaire business owner and on opening up a brokerage account with you. The chances of that happening are like 1 out of 1 million kids could maybe do that because he's such a great natural salesperson and got some decent training. So it's such a rare needle in the haystack. What I did was I invented a system called the straight line, and that was like this great equalizer. It allowed any kid who had the desire to become proficient enough at sales and language, and it allowed them to close even the toughest, most sophisticated investors. So that was really at the basis of that, because once that started, it allowed these young kids to make money, massive sums of it, and they told their friends and so on and so forth. And the firm began to grow like a weed. And ultimately that system spread out to other industries, and people all over the world use it today. It's very powerful.
Yeah, I used it personally. So to give you a bit of background on myself, I was running call centers around that time, and I was just selling an array of different products, a lot of insurance products. And then I moved over into investments at one point. And the first book that I bought was actually your book. And I used that myself to actually close quite a few sales. So I can actually attest to it and say,
yeah, it works great.
It definitely works. It does work well. So how did that all come about? What did piecing that system together look like for you?
So what happened is that I was a salesperson myself, and I had a junior partner played by Jonah Hill in the movie, right? And I came up with an idea to start calling the wealthiest 1% of American investors and selling them $5 stocks. Before that, I'd been calling average moms and pops and selling them penny stocks. So if an average mom and pop would buy a penny stock, they might invest $500. Yet if you were to call a super wealthy investor who's buying a $5 or $10 stock, they might put $1 million into that, right? So I kind of stumbled upon that untapped niche, was this, super wealthy investor, $5 or $10 stock, not a penny stock, a very big difference between the two, right? When someone buys a penny stock, it's like an unsophisticated person taking a flyer. They put a few $100s in. It's a pretty easy sale. It's an impulse sale, right? So I had a system of influence I was teaching. It didn't have a name, but it was really powerful. And I taught all these young guys, about 12 of them, to call average moms and pops and sell them penny stocks. Then when I stumbled upon this niche, I tested it myself. And the results that I got was so extraordinary. Like when I first tested it, the first trade was like $120,000 trade, where the profit on that trade was $60,000 versus the average profit on a penny stock trade was like $250, like 60,000, 250. I'm like, what the hell? I'm like, wow, I'm going to pivot. I'm going to take all of my efforts and direct it to that. And I had these 12 kids working for me. I said, wow, all I got to do is teach them how to do what I'm doing, what my junior partner is doing. I taught him to do it, and I'm going to be a billionaire, right? And that's when the problem started, because I tried to get them to do what I was doing, and they couldn't do it. So I was witnessing this really strange thing happen right before my eyes, where I'm calling the same people they're calling. We're selling the same stock, using the same script. I have a 50% closing rate. I'm making millions of dollars. My junior partner, Danny's got a 30% closing rate. And the closing rate of my 12 kids was 0. They couldn't close anybody. I was like, what's going on? And what is this difference? Why am I able to do it? Why was I able to teach Danny to do it? And why can't I teach these 12 kids to do it? Like, what is missing here? What am I doing wrong? And I went on a quest and I just analyzed other people's sales process. And, it's back in 1988, right? And what I quickly found out is that my system back then, well, it didn't have a name. It was much better than anything I could find. So my system wasn't working. My system was better than what was out there at the time. What was I going to do? I had nowhere to go. So I was kind of stuck, right? So they say, necessity is the mother of invention. Well, in my case, I had a necessity. I had to figure out a new way to train my young salespeople because what I was doing wasn't working. So that's what it was. I was in this position where I couldn't get them to close. I had to come up with a new way of training, a new approach. And I stumbled upon that after about a month of trial and error. And ultimately, had this magic moment where I knew if I didn't come up with a solution, the guys were going to quit. They wanted to go back to calling moms and pops and selling them penny stocks. So I, had this big meeting one night and I'm like, guys, I don't understand, what's going on. Like, I'm doing it. Danny's doing it. I know you can do it too. Why can't you close rich people? And, I heard all the excuses. There's too many objections. They keep cutting us off. There's 1,000 objections. Like, really, 1,000, like, tell me, right? Let's write them all down. So I made them write down all the objections. And it was that night when I started having them actually write down the so-called 1,000 objections they were hearing, right? And I had them actually call them out to me one by one. I mean, it was done listing all 1,000 objections on the board. At the end of the day, there were only 14. That was it. There were only 14 objections, not 1,000. And I looked at them like, God, you guys are unbelievable. You guys are crying over 1,000 objections. At the end of the day, there's only 14. And by the way, even those don't matter. And then suddenly this idea popped in my head. I'm like, don't you guys get it? I'm like, every sale's the same. And they're all looking at me like, what? Like, what do you mean every sale's the same? It seemed like a ridiculous statement to make every sale is the same. Think about it. People have different needs, different values, different pain points. People bring in different experiences into a sale, different predispositions, prejudices, right? How could every sale be the same? And as it stands, every sale is the same. And all of that is true. So yeah, people do have different needs, different values, different pain points, but every sale's the same. What I meant that night and what turned out to be probably the most profound thing I've ever said when it comes to selling is that, despite all people's different needs, values, pain points, experiences, despite all that stuff, the same 3 core elements must line up in the prospect's mind before you have any chance of closing them. There are 3 things that must line up in the mind of a prospect. If one of those things is missing, you basically have no chance of closing them at all. If all 3 are there, you got a really high likelihood, right? And I call those elements the 3 10s, and I'll get to that. But when I said to my guys, I'm like, don't you guys get it? I'm like, watch. And then this idea came into my head, like pop. I'm like, it's a straight line. And I drew a straight line on the board behind me, and I put a big thick X on either end. And I said, this is open where the sale begins, and this is your close, where the client says, yes, let's do it. And what happened was there was something about this idea of a straight line that it served as a context of what was happening when you were in a situation of influence, like what came first, what came second. And that line started something in my own mind. Over that night, I came up with a new way of selling and teaching sales. And the next morning, these kids that could not close a door, basically, the next morning, all 12 of them went on and started opening up accounts like water. And within a month or 2, they were millionaires, and the rest is history. And it turned out that I had to come up with this new way of selling along this idea of a straight line. It just was it was a very powerful metaphor for people. And I still teach it today.
Yeah, I understand that. So you talk a lot about certainty. So can we talk a little bit about the different areas of certainty that are really important from taking people from that initial sales call to that endpoint where they're ready to buy?
Right. So like the idea when I said these three core elements, right? What I was talking about is certainty. So basically at the highest level, what sales really is the transference of emotion. And the primary emotion that you're transferring is the emotion of certainty. And when we think of certainty in sales, like what do you think of? Well, you think they must be really certain that the product you're trying to get them to buy makes sense. Like it's great. It's the best one. Like if I want to try to sell you a stock or an investment or an insurance policy or an automobile, whatever it might be, tangible, intangible, it could be a service. It could be a tangible product. It could be an intangible. It could be an idea. You know, in your mind, when I say, oh, yeah, let's talk about this Mercedes. And the second I say, hey, I'd like to sell you a Mercedes, or you walk into a Mercedes dealership, right? The second that you realize you're in a situation where you're being sold to, your brain will instantly say, based on everything I've seen, heard, know about Mercedes, I think Mercedes is what? Is it good? Is it bad? Does it suck? Is it the best? So imagine a 1 to a 10. A 10 means you think you're absolutely certain it's the best. 1 means it's the biggest piece of shit in the world. Like, you know, 1, you hate it. 10, you love it, right? So question, where would you want your prospect to be on that scale when you ask them for the order? When you ask someone to buy, do you want them in a 10 thinking, they think, wow, I love this product. This product is the best. It fills all my needs. It's a great price, great value proposition, great cost benefit ratio? Or do you want them at a 1 where they say, this is the worst piece of shit in the world? Where do you want them? Obviously at a 10, right? You want them to be thinking at a 10. Well, next question is, where are they when they enter the encounter? Like when they walk in the door or pick up the telephone and they realize where are they? Well, the answer is they're somewhere, because they're from planet Earth. I mean, they all know about Mercedes. They know about life insurance. They know about stocks. They know about whatever you're selling. The human brain has heard something and will fill in the missing pieces. And that individual, that prospect, will land somewhere on the certainty scale. Maybe at a 6, 5, a 7, like somewhere in the middle, based on what their predispositions are, right? That's where they start. Meanwhile, you, the salesperson, where are you? Well, you better be at an absolute 10. You know, you're recommending the product. So you're at this place where you're like, you know, I know my product is the best. I know it's awesome. I know it will fill you. I know my product is the best. And you're transferring that certainty that you feel inside because you know about your product, and you say things, you explain things, you do things, you offer them demonstrations. And the goal is you want to get them to be as certain as you. So when you're done explaining it, they're like, wow, thank you. Now that I understand everything about your product, you're right. It is the best. It's a 10. Like that's your goal. You're trying to transfer the certainty that you have to the prospect. So let's say you do that. Let's say after you're done making your presentation, right? And you say your last word and they're like thinking to themselves, wow, now that I know everything about that product, oh my God, it's the absolute best. They're at a 10 on the certainty scale. They love your product. Question, will they buy from you? If they're absolutely positively certain your product is best, will they buy it? If they need the product, they want the product, they can afford the product, question, will they buy from you? The answer is not yes. And the answer is not no. The answer is maybe. Maybe they will and maybe they won't, because here's another question. What if in the process of you making them certain, transferring that certainty, what if you said something or did something or did it in a way that somehow made them not trust you, made them not like you? So when they were done, they're like, all right, I love the product. I don't really trust that salesperson, but I get, well, their product seems great, but they're not trustworthy. Question, will you buy from that person who you don't trust? Absolutely not, right? In fact, if you really love the product that much, you'll find someone else you can trust and you'll find the same product. We don't buy from people that we don't trust unless we're absolutely desperate and have no choice. It's like a last resort. So it's not enough that someone's absolutely certain that they love your product. There's also this continuum or line of scale of certainty for you, the salesperson. They have to trust and connect with you. So imagine if you said to someone, what do you think of that salesperson? They said, oh my God, that's the greatest salesperson in the world. I trust them. They're great. They took their time. They had my best interest at heart. They told me everything I needed to know. What a great sales. That would be a 10. Like, you really trust and like the salesperson. Or you could say, hey, what do you think of that salesperson? Oh, that salesperson is the biggest asshole that ever lived. I wouldn't trust them as far as I could throw them. If I turn my back, they'd probably stick the knife and they'd steal my credit card information. So in other words, there's this continuum of certainty, not just for the product, but also for you, the salesman that is trying to sell them the product. So it's not enough that they love the product. They also have to trust and connect with you. So let's say you've accomplished that as well. Let's say you've got them to the point where they love your product. Number two, they trust and connect with you. Will they buy? Well, the answer is still maybe yes, maybe no, because what if they don't trust the company that stands behind the product? There's going to be a company that's to deliver the product, do customer service. Now, sometimes the second and third 10 can be the same or they're interrelated, but in many cases, the standalone isolated thing, they must trust the company that stands behind the product. So those three elements: number one, they must love the product. Two, they must trust the person selling them the product. Three, trust the company that stands behind the product. What your goal is when you sell, when you influence, when you persuade, when you try to close, you're trying to get someone to the point where those three items, they're at a 10, 10, 10. 10 for the product, 10 for you, the salesperson, they trust you. 10 for the company, they trust the company. 10, 10, 10 in a single moment in time. And then you ask for the order. And if you got someone to a 10, 10, 10 in a single moment in time and ask for the order the right way, you have an excellent shot of closing them. And if one of those is missing, you have basically no shot. Now, if someone is uncertain, let's say they love the product, they don't trust you, what do they say? If you ask them to buy, do they say, oh, I'm sorry, Jordan, I just don't trust you? No. They say, oh, it sounds good, Jordan, let me think about it. Or let me call you back. So what you start noticing is that all the common objections that salespeople typically hear, let me think about it, let me call you back, bad time of year, blah, 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 Santa Claus, the tooth fairy, whatever it might be, the excuses, right? What they really are is they're smoke screens for uncertainty. Because rather than a prospect saying to you, I don't like your product, or I don't trust you, it's easy for them to say, oh, yeah, it sounds good. Let me think about it. Let me call you back. It's a bad time of year. So those common objections that trip up the average salesperson, it turns out what they really are is smoke screens for uncertainty. And when you make someone more certain, suddenly, almost magically, all those objections melt away and people start to buy at very high levels. That's the straight line in a nutshell. Now, the question is, how do you do that? How does an average, so what expert closers, what natural born closers like me, maybe you are too, I don't know, but if you're a natural born closer, what it means is the way your brain is naturally wired, you know intuitively your brain says, I better say things to make them really certain about the product. I better make things that make them trust me, and they better trust my use. You automatically, intuitively know. So you say those things, and you say them in the right order with the right tonality. But the problem is 1 out of a million people is truly a natural born closer. Most people, their brains don't tell them what to say and when to say it in the right order. It's counterintuitive. So people fail to say the right things and they end up not closing. So with the straight line system, what we do is we essentially unpack a sale. We break a sale down into what's really happening. What are you accomplishing? What actually had to happen to get someone to say yes? Someone who was on the fence saying, let me do it. How do you get that person to say yes? And once you know what those things are, you can then say, okay, I have to accomplish this, second, third. And we learn to actually place those things almost along the line, and slowly but surely we accomplish all those things and people start to buy at very high levels. That's in a nutshell.
Yeah, I think you do a really good job of breaking it down in a really simplistic way. I mean, there's so many different sales methods out there. I mean, I've looked at thousands of them over the years, but there's never been one that's been so systematic in the approach, at least in my opinion.
It had to be. You know why? You want to know why it had to be? Because the kids that worked for me were morons. No, seriously, the average IQ of the kid that worked for me was like Forrest Gump on 3 hits of acid. So like it had to be a system that was so simple, so easy. You get it? That I was faced with a situation where I had uneducated people who were not good at sales. So they had to come up with some way that was like so spoon-fed, so simple that anyone could understand it. And I'm not trying to belittle these kids because many of them weren't, it wasn't they were stupid. They weren't educated correctly. They weren't really well educated, and they weren't natural closers. But what this system did is it allowed them to close exactly like me. It allowed them to sell like me, to sound like me. And the results were so staggering that I had kids who were like, 19-year-old kid was in a pool hall one day, and 3 months later, he's making $1 million a month. Like, that's how staggering it was. And that was not a unique situation. Like anybody, all they had to have was desire to learn the system and hard work. And it was a guarantee that you'd become rich. That's how powerful it was.
So let's talk a little bit about the close here, because I feel like this is another area where everybody just seems to fall up. In general, I think people are actually scared of asking for that order. That's one thing I bumped into time and time again. They just kind of beat around the bush a little bit. They kind of went in a little bit soft. And you talk a lot about that. Can you go into a little bit more detail about your version of how people should be closing?
So you take a step back in the process. Give me a rebel, please. Take a step back in the process, right? So one thing I left out that's really important to point out is that at the heart of the straight line is a concept that you must learn how to take control of the linguistic encounter. You have to be in control of the encounter, because when you're in control, that's what allows you to start doing things the same way every single time. When I said every sale's the same, what I meant that night was that, to me, because I would take immediate control of the conversation, it allowed me to line up those elements the same way every time. See, just because you know what the elements are, right? Well, if you're not in control of the conversation, you might know what elements need to line up. But if the prospect is in control, how do you line up these random elements in the same way? You can't, because you're playing reactive ball versus proactive. I never seen a team win the World Cup playing defense. You got to play offense. You got to be in control, playing offense, right? So the way, okay, great, that makes sense. So, well, how do you do that? How do you take control? Well, in order to take control of a conversation, you need to be perceived as an expert. You need to sound like an expert. When you are perceived as being an expert in your field, sharp, on the ball, enthusiastic, people say, wow, this is a person worth listening to. This person can help me achieve my goals. And also, we've been conditioned since we're yay big to defer to experts. Like when we're in the presence of an expert, we know that we're supposed to let them ask us questions. We answer them honestly. We answer them forthrightly. We don't interrupt them. We saw it when we were very young. Our parents took us to the doctor when we were sick, and you saw this special doctor. Even your own parents would defer to the doctor. The doctor had a lab coat on. He dressed a certain way. He had a stethoscope. He had all these diplomas. He was Dr. So-and-so, right? And when the doctor would ask you a question, you wouldn't say, why? No, you answer the question. You answer the doctor fully. And when the doctor asks you a second question or a follow-up question, you answer honestly. And then when the doctor is finished asking you all the questions, he's doing his examination and he's asking you questions and trying to find out what's wrong with you. He's asking you questions because he's trying to solve a problem. And he's an expert at solving that particular problem. So we play along, we cooperate, we don't interrupt the doctor, we allow that doctor to control the narrative. He's been trained. When the doctor is done with his examination and he's asked all the questions he needs to ask, he's done the physical exam, he's identified the things he needs to identify, what does the doctor do? He says, thanks, have a good day. Or he says, okay, got it. You got the measles. You're like, okay, you're a fucking doctor. What do I do next? Like you wait because you're expecting, what's the doctor supposed to do? And here's how you fucking resolve it. Here's what you do. Here's the prescription. Here's what. So we're almost wired programmed. So when we're with an expert, the expert says, okay, here's your problem. I've asked you questions. Here's your solution. Let me tell you, this is the solution. Baba, it's X, Y, Z. Do this, do that. And here's how you get started. Here's a prescription. Go to the pharmacy, fill it. You tell them what to do. If you're a car salesman, you're going to say, here's the car that best suits your needs. This is how much it costs. Here's the best way to finance it. You don't want that color. You definitely want this option. You don't want that one. This one's a waste of money. You want to do this right now. And believe me, you'll be very glad you did. Sound good? And you shut the fuck up. All right? In other words, whatever it is, if you're an expert, experts say, listen, here's what you need to do. If I'm a lawyer, I say, here's the steps you need to take. You need to open up this type of corporation, file this type of paperwork. If an accountant's doing your tax, they say, okay, I want you to pay this amount. They don't just say, ask you questions like, have a nice day. No, they offer you a solution. And at a certain point, the doctor says to you, here's what you need to do. I need you to go to the hospital next Tuesday because you need surgery. The cost is going to be $5,000. I'm going to take out your fucking kidney, and you know what? It's going to save your life. Promise you'll be very glad, because if you don't, you got, you're like, you're running to get a fucking, I'll give you one better. When you get a little bit older, guys, especially here, it's amazing that when we've been so programmed that when we're in the presence of an expert, we defer. We let them control the conversation. We answer what questions they ask us. We answer them honestly. We answer them forthright. We'll do what they say. If they ask us to do something, we do it. For example, I go to the doctor now. I'm like in my 50s, right? And I always get to that dreaded point in the examination when the doctor says to me, all right, drop your pants, bend over, and he says, stick his finger up my ass, right? Because he wants to feel my prostate, right? Test me. So, like, what do I do when the doctor says bend over? I mean, he puts the fucking glove on, and he puts a little lube on his finger, and he fucking sticks his finger up my ass and starts fishing for my prostate. I'm like, what do I do? I'm like, fuck, fine. I bend over, I pluck my ass like a fucking Thanksgiving turkey, and I let him stick his finger up my ass. Why? He's a fucking doctor. The guy went to medical school. He's earned the right to stick his finger in my ass. I have no choice. He's a doctor. But what if I go to the doctor's office and I'm at the point where it's his assistant? It's some young guy maybe it's a woman. I'll let him do it. But the point is, if it's like a physician's assistant who's a nurse or something, like, all right, bend over, I want to stick my finger. I'm like, no, you haven't earned the right to stick the finger in my ass because you haven't gone to school for 10 years, because I'm not letting anyone stick that finger in my ass unless they've been to school for 10 years, and you've earned that right. No, you'll never forget this, by the way. Everyone's listening. The point is, it's a funny example, but just think about that. Like, I actually am bending over, dropping my drawers and letting someone do that. Why? Because they're the doctor. You do what you're told. When you're in the presence of a true expert in their field, you answer their questions and you follow their recommendations. So when you're a salesperson and you're selling a product or whatever that might be, a learning product, an insurance product, a tangible, doesn't matter, service, right? If they truly believe that you're an expert and that you're there to help them, and how do they know? Well, you ask them questions, they'll answer you honestly. So when they're done asking, you're done asking your questions, and then you say, listen, based on what you've said to me, here's the solution. This is a perfect fit for you. Let me tell you why. And you lay out this really powerful solution, and then you say to them, and believe me, your problem will be solved. And again, Jim, getting started is very simple. It's a question of your name, some basic information to get the account open, cash outlay of only £1,000 over the next couple of days, Jim. And believe me, the only problem you'll have is you didn't get started 6 months ago because you'd already have the result and you'd be sitting on Easy Street. Sound fair enough? And you shut up. Like, you ask them for the order. And what you said, people for some reason, like, they're scared to just say, here's what you need to do. Here's how much you need to buy. Because the reason I'm an expert, I tell you what you need. That's my job. That's why you're paying me. I'd be remiss in my duties if I didn't say to you, here's how you get started. Here's what you need. Well, why else are you on the telephone? Why else are you even wasting your time? I'm here to solve your problem. So the straight line, what it does, it allows you, it shows you how to be, because the $1 million question was, okay, great. That sounds like it makes sense. And it does. I know it sounds like it makes sense, but how do you do that? How do you make sure that you're perceived the right way? You only got 4 seconds. That's it. In those first 4 seconds, you must be perceived in exactly the right way. If you're perceived the wrong way, meaning, dull as dishwater, a disinterested bore, and a stone cold novice, good luck trying to close someone that thinks you're that. Someone thinks you're a moron, a novice, and the bore, and they're gonna buy from. No, they're not. They're gonna answer your questions with questions of their own. They'll interrupt you. They'll cut you off. They'll probably hang up. They don't take you seriously. But if you're perceived the right way, sharp as a tack, enthusiastic as hell, an expert in your field, those 3 things, and it happens in those first 4 seconds, then you set yourself up to have a really easy time, because now they defer to you. They say, wow, this person sounds, wow, they're sharp. They're an expert. And then you start using that positioning. So you position yourself as an expert, not so you talk. You start asking them questions. You start asking people questions. That's what experts do. You ask people questions. And when you ask someone a question, you ask them in a certain order. You ask them with using a certain tonality. And most importantly, when they respond to that question, you want to engage in something called active listening. Active listening means that as someone responds, you're like, yup, got it. Ooh, ooh. I'm exaggerating it, but the point is you give someone feedback. So they say, wow, this person really gets me. They understand me. They feel my pain. Sometimes you're going to finish someone's sentences and they say something, saying, oh, you mean better. And because you should see, the key is you don't want to just sound like an expert. You really want to be an expert too. So once you get really good at something, you could almost, if someone says something, you clarify their own statement, you mirror it back, and they're like, yeah, that's what I meant. They're like, fucking damn, this guy is good. So like the point is that when you're engaged in the right type of intelligence gathering, straight line intelligence gathering, by the time you've asked the questions you need to ask, not only have you learned the things that you need to know about this person, what their pain points are, what their beliefs are, what their values, what their needs are, their core needs, their tertiary needs, their secondary, all their needs, right? But also the person is saying to themselves, wow, this guy's really sharp. Like, man, like I never really, wow, they really get me. So if they're thinking that about you after you've asked them all these questions, when you utter those words, well, Jim, John, Jill, based on what you've just said to me, this program is a perfect fit for you. Let me tell you why. They're like hanging on you. Now they're like, wow, what is it? You already own them. And now you lay out your solution. This is your presentation. Name of the product, name of the company, name of the system. Here's my solution. Here's why it's so awesome. Here's why it's a perfect for you. Features, benefits, feature, benefit. Okay. Urgency, value proposition. And then you're going to slowly get to the point, not going to let it go on too long, but you want to create this airtight, logical case for certainty about the product. And then you can start transitioning into your close. That's the straight line in a nutshell.
It's a real nice summary. So I think I'd be interested to know what your thoughts are on how business is changing now. So a lot of our members, they're obviously interested in online businesses. With the influence of Corona, everyone's seeing things fast tracking in that kind of direction. How does your straight line method translate into the online world?
Yeah, well, it's like never been more applicable than it is now because, the straight line system was designed. Remember what it was designed for. There was no internet. But what were we doing? We were engaged in what you guys now call distance selling. Like I take that for granted. Distance selling is all we did. We had a company in Long Island, which is in New York City, right? 20 miles off Wall Street. And from this one office of 3,000 people, I called all over the country, all over the world, from one location. And we called people who never heard of us before, never had seen us before, never had met us before. And we, on a telephone call, we were able to close them on $1 million trades. That's distance persuasion. This is what people are referring to now as if somehow in COVID, this is now what? This is a new thing? I don't understand that. This is the oldest thing in the book. You get on the telephone with someone who lives across the country and you close them. It's not new. It's old. It's old as the hills. The beauty of the internet now, it's the greatest lead generation tool out there. So I use in all of my businesses, I use the internet to generate massive amounts of leads. But there's only so far that you can get someone online. If you want to upsell them to higher priced products, more intricate programs that have more value to deliver, at a certain point in time, you got to get on the phone with them. I always say the one big mistake that some internet marketers make, e-commerce people, they think if they just master the art of e-commerce or master internet marketing or Facebook ads, they'll somehow never have to speak to a human being again. What a load of bullshit. It's just not true. You still have to communicate with human beings, all right? And the ones that really make money, the entrepreneurs, the marketers that really make money, they do both. They use the internet as top of the funnel to generate leads and get early close with tripwire offers to get people as customers. Then they expand the relationship by picking up that phone and having people call them and offer them more value. That's how it never fits better than it does right now. My business is booming right now because distance persuasion is so crucial right now.
Yeah, I love that. And I want to touch on your point about value there. So in my own journey, I spent a lot of time selling things that, in my opinion, didn't really provide that much value. I'm sure this is something you can relate to at a certain point.
Of course. It's a mistake I made when I was very young.
Yeah, it's all about the money, right? That's where I was at. As many other people, they get caught up in that trap. What did the transition look like for you when you kind of made that realization that, look, I should be trying to contribute to people's lives rather than just looking out for my own ends?
Well, you know, mine is probably the world's most extreme example of that. It really is. You know, I went on that trip, you know, and took thousands of others. I think I trained about 30,000 people all over, you know, back in the 80s and 90s. And it was all about closing. How do you make as much money as you can? And it didn't really matter what you were selling, how much value. And, you know, and listen, that's, you know, I didn't invent that. As I'm sure you're well aware, people do that whether there was a Jordan Belfort or Wolf of Wall Street or not. It's been going on before me and it will still go on after me. What I will tell you is this. You'll make a lot more money if you focus on selling value. A lot more money. And it will be sustainable and you'll feel great about it. Any moron could learn how to use the straight line to sell wine futures like they do in fucking England sometimes, or carbon, all the stupid stuff you guys sell over there, some people, right? But all those people who do that stuff, either they get in trouble and they're broke again in 6 months. They might make 20, 30,000 a month for a while. They always end up broke. People that have sustainable wealth and feel good and build great lives, what they do is they find a product that has amazing value and they use the straight lines to sell that. It's just as easy to find something that has value and sell that. So it starts with that, just to take something that has value and make sure you're delivering value to people. If you do that, then you're going to make a fortune and it will be sustainable and you'll feel great about it.
Yeah, that's the real difference between quick money and long-term money, right?
Exactly.
Yeah, we had one of our members. It was a quite interesting conversation we had when we first announced that you'd be coming on and doing a live webinar. His opinion was, oh, well, he went to jail, he was arrested for fraud, etc. And I kind of end up saying, look, I totally agree with you, but all the best people that have ever done anything, they've come from making some really bad decisions and then turning it around. What was the point of realization for you? I assume it's got something to do with going to jail. That probably does help a little bit. But what was that real point that you thought, okay, I really need to turn this around now?
It was before that. I mean, that, you know what, it was a delay from the time I went to jail from when all that stuff happened. I mean, a lot of it stemmed from, I made a fundamental mistake that when I invented the straight line system, it was so powerful that I outstripped my ability to find good products to sell. So in other words, when it first started, like I had a product that was okay and I was selling it using the straight line, but I sold so much of it, I ran out of it and I should have slowed down my growth. It's like, imagine if, you know, when the iPhone was invented, and it's not a great analogy, but it's a decent analogy. Imagine if when Steve Jobs invented the iPhone, they're like, all right, we have enough parts and labor to make 1 million iPhones. We can make 1 million great iPhones, but we have demand for 10 million. So let's just keep making them. They might suck the next 9 million, but we'll still make the money. So instead of slowing down and saying, no, we're only going to sell 1 million phones and we'll have to make less money this year. We'll just slow down our growth. I didn't do that. I just went out and sold 10 million. That was the mistake I made. I was very young and I didn't really, it was in the beginning, I didn't see it coming, and ultimately I didn't really care, because when you get caught up on that ethics in the wrong direction, you start justifying and rationalizing. So, ultimately, when I went to jail, I already made a shift in my life and in my mind. I would never, get involved in the product, and I would never use the straight line for something I didn't believe in again. And that's really, my life has come to represent the exact opposite type of journey. And I empower people all over the world. I teach ethical persuasion, and I try to ensure that others use the straight line ethically. I can't always ensure that because I can't control people all over the world, right? But I do my part to make sure people understand that there is a danger when you become an expert closer, an expert persuader. Like any other powerful weapon, weapons can be used for good or ill. So, a gun can be used by a mom on her, farm to defend it against people coming to rape her and her children, or a guy can climb a bell tower with a gun and start shooting people and killing them. It's like the gun is not evil or malevolent or good. It's the person using it. So any powerful thing can be used for good or ill. So you have to maintain your ethics and integrity. When you become an expert closer with the straight line, you got to use it ethically.
Yeah, I love that. I think it's a very fine line between manipulation and inspiration, right? And that fine line is the ethics behind what you're doing. So what does your life look like now? Obviously, I know that you go around teaching the straight line theory, and you're a speaker as well. What does the day-to-day of Jordan Belfort look like these days?
Yeah, I do a lot of teaching and mentoring. I have businesses I build myself. I'm in many different businesses. I have my own sales force. I train them and I love doing them. I'm growing a sales force right now. I do hiring for companies. I actually help companies scale. So companies come to me that are looking to hire trained salesmen in bulk. So I hire for companies, which is a big business of mine. And I enjoy it. I love it. I love being in business. I love the idea of mentoring people. I have a great podcast. I have great info products I sell. I wish that the world would open up so I could start going on tour again, because I love touring, right? I'm doing most stuff online now, and that's fine. That's, what you do, you pivot, but I can't wait till the world opens up again so I can start going around and visiting all my friends all over the world.
Yeah, for sure. So what kind of advice would you give to people that are looking to set up a business in 2021?
I think it's a great time to start a business. I mean, right now, I always think that in the toughest times, that's when you want to start a business, because if you can build a business when things are tough, then you really are going to make it when things get easier, right? So I think right now is an amazing time. There's opportunity everywhere. Just remember, you don't want to be the guy starting a business selling buggy whips in 1905 when they just invented the car. So think about what business you're going into, and think about, what changes have occurred in the last year or so because of the pandemic and buying and behavioral changes. Maybe you want to shy away from certain businesses that might be susceptible to shutdowns and can't continue to operate if there are things like coronavirus lockdowns, which I am against, but I think you guys have one right now in England or something, right? So you want to, I'd personally be reluctant to open up a restaurant right now. Although if you open up a restaurant, maybe it's a great business to be in if you figure out a way to actually leverage that so people can, get your restaurant food at home, and there's many delivery services out there. So I just would be aware of opening a business and I always want to be in a situation where I have the wind at my back. They always say a rising tide lifts all ships. It doesn't lift all ships equally, but it does lift all ships. You want to have, a business that's, taking advantage of a rising tide.
Yeah. And what would you say in terms of mindset are the key factors there? Because I find so many people in this type of industry, a lot of the people that we deal with, they start encountering all sorts of different hurdles. And a big part of my job is kind of explaining to how to change their relationship with failure. That's a primary thing. What would you say is really important in terms of mindset, is really going to help people through these tougher times and the obstacles that they overcome in any business?
To me, I love getting into business and trying things and not having them exactly work out the right way, and then pivoting and taking a different approach. And, to me, that's part of the fun of it all. Like if you expect to get into business and get it right the first time, you're going to have a very, very tough and lonely and frustrating time of it. Right. we go into business and, you go in with the best plan available, what you think is the best way forward. It's very, very seldom are you going to get it right the first time. You're not supposed to. So, the idea is to go in and test your ideas. And when they don't work out, which they inevitably won't the first time, you pivot, change one thing, and eventually you pivot, you keep changing your approach. You need to master the art of what I call failing elegantly. The lessons are in the failures. You want to fail quickly, fail cheaply, maximize on the lessons learned, and then try again. Eventually, if you take that attitude, you will be successful.
It's the bottom line. Fuck up, keep fucking up, and own it, right?
There you go. Exactly.
So what's the rest of the year looking like for you? What are you going to be doing now? Obviously, you're locked down. I assume you're not going to be returning to Miami at this point.
No, well, so I had coronavirus a few weeks ago. I got corona, so I'm fully recovered now, which is great. I had a very minor case. So I'm fully recovered. I'm immune now. I never worried about coronavirus, and I'm still not worried about it. So now I can't catch it again, so I'm golden. I'm going to Turkey for an event soon. So my next stop is I've been traveling to events. I got coronavirus at an event. I did an event in Tampa. I came down with it. Big deal. I was sick for a few days, and now I'm better. Next, I'm going to Turkey. And I'm sure I think I booked something also in Italy, maybe. And for the end of December, I'm starting to travel. I don't let coronavirus even, so you want me to come somewhere, invite me, I'll come. You got to pay me, but I don't care about coronavirus at all. Especially now that I had it, I can't catch it again. So now I'm but even before I didn't catch it, I went to Brazil. I went to every country. I don't care about that. I don't live my life in fear of a virus. I'm young, I'm healthy. But if you're older and you have an immune disease, I'd be very careful, but that's not me,
Yeah, I've been camping out in Bali for this whole procedure, so I'm not bothered at all. I live in a perfect little bubble. There's nothing to worry about.
And that doesn't even occur to me. I think it's the biggest overblown bunch of nonsense ever. This is a virus, but there's lots of viruses.
Get into it. I know you got some pretty strong feelings about Corona. I've heard you talk about it before. So go on, tell us, what's your thought process on Corona? Go as conspiracy as
No, I listen again. I've always said that I thought that locking down an economy is the dumbest thing, stupidest thing ever. Like making people stay home and quarantine. It's just idiotic because you don't keep sick people. It doesn't work. As we all know, it didn't work. It's idiotic. Now I understand the very, very beginning when they didn't know how deadly it was. Okay, maybe there was a day or two, but even that was exaggerated. But the point is, it's obvious that coronavirus is dangerous for a very, very small group of people, very small group of older people and people with certain comorbidities. Outside of those people, it's not deadly at all. I had it. My whole family's had it. It's nothing. It's like nonsense. Like literally, I've had far worse colds than my coronavirus was nothing. I've had worse colds than corona. And really, everybody I know that's had it has had the same experience. They're saying it was not that bad. I lost my sense of smell, which sucked. Now I'm getting it back again, thank God. That was really annoying. But I never even coughed once. Now, I know some people have much tougher courses with it. But people don't die from coronavirus unless they're really, really old or they have a comorbidity, or there's that rare exception where, yes, some people do die. But then again, people die of cancer. People die of car accidents. People die from smoking. They die of secondhand smoke. They die of kidney disease, heart disease, and everything else. They die of the fucking flu. Okay? If you want to live your life in fear about what might happen to you, and that's your choice. If you have a grandmother that you love and she lives with you, yes, then you better be really careful. You're an asshole. But if that's not you and you're not exposing an older person you're going to kill someone, then I'm not going to tell you how to live your life, but I don't think it's really even living. If you're sitting there with a mask on and you feel, I'm so scared about coronavirus. These fucking masks don't work anyway. It's like a joke. It's nonsense. So anyway, listen, I guess if you wore the right type of mask and you made sure you had it on perfectly, yeah, maybe it might help a little bit. But I just think that this is a complete political tool that was used to destabilize Trump, and it worked, as you can see. And It's used around the world to control people, scare the shit out of them, and bring a socialistic sort of view on us. And I don't think they'll get away with that. I think it's going to be a huge backlash, and it's already happening. That's what I think.
Yeah. How far into the conspiracy rabbit hole do you go, or do you just
not too? I'm not too deep at all. Not too deep. I don't go that deep into the conspiracy stuff because I think you don't need to. I think people will I don't think it needs to be. There's lots of silent conspiracies that are unspoken. It's just human nature. Like, I don't think everyone's getting together in dark rooms. Ooh, I don't know if it's about, maybe some people are, but it's more like everyone's like just in on it. Like, let's just scare the shit out of it. It's obvious, like the mainstream media, it's so biased. I mean, it's just like, it's almost like a joke. Like anyone that's has their eyes open knows that the mainstream media is complete and utter bullshit. It's all nonsense. They lie. They've lost all their credibility. In this country, no one believes what they read or hear on the news. It's just the New York Times is a fucking rag, and everyone knows it, okay? Except for some ultra-liberal shitheads who want to congratulate themselves on how woke they are. Only they like that paper now. So there you go.
You've had your share of backlash from the media, I'm sure. What kind of mad stories they came up about you?
Not with this. No one gave me backlash with this. I've come out very strongly against, and no one ever said a word to me about it because my view has never been like I think it's 5G. I don't think that. Like I never said this. No, I believe there's a virus, and I believe the virus kills people, but it kills a certain type of person, and I think that. The cure can't be worse than the disease. So I was just looking at it from a very pragmatic point of view. And also that to every 1% that you go of unemployment, like 10,000 people die. Like there's a cost to creating unemployment. There's a cost to poverty. And I don't think you can't create poverty in a vacuum. You can't just shut down an economy to try to stop a virus without thinking, what's it going to cost me on the other side? How many unintended consequences in the form of sickness, death, despair, and loss of quality of life to people. So, my mom is I love her. She's locked in her house for 9 months now by herself. What kind of life is that? I'm not saying she should be. In my mother's case, she's old. She has to be very careful. But, there's many people that are doing what she's doing that shouldn't be doing it. She should be being careful because for her, it would be a death sentence, perhaps. So until there's a vaccine or something that maybe will protect her, she's got to be very careful. But there's so many people that are not in that category, but are acting that way. That just makes me sick.
Yeah. So the bottom line is take action, don't live your life in fear, and use this absolute nightmare as an opportunity to get something better out of life, right?
There you go.
Yeah, perfect. Well, I think that's a really good point to end on. I think it's been a pleasure talking to you. Let people know where they can find you, where they can find out.
Yeah, best place.
What you're doing, Jordan.
Sure, jordanbelfort.com. Go to my website, check out my stuff. I have lots of products and about to start a massive sale for the Christmas season. Every year we do that. I start to really discount my products. And I got amazing products and a lot of free stuff as well. Check it out. My podcast, The Wolf's Den. And also Sales School. I have something called Sales School, which is a podcast I do every day, which is free sales training. People really love that. So I would check out Sales School as well.
Yeah, that's amazing. Well, thank you very much for your time, Jordan. It's been a pleasure.
You got it, buddy. Good luck. Take care.
Have the rest of your day.